Hey everyone, I'm very happy to speak at DjangoCon Europe 2021. My name is Amanda, and I'm going to be speaking about Django Channels today. My talk's name is called Your Very Own Real-Time Chat with Django Channels. Um, I'm Amanda, as I've said. I'm a full-stack developer at Vinta Software, a software studio located in Recife, Brazil. I'm 23. I'm Brazilian, but I'm living in Portugal, and I have 3.5 years of experience with Django plus React. This talk is basically like I wanted to learn more about Django channels and do some amateur projects with it. So I had some fun with it and wanted to share the knowledge I got up to now. Please feel free to reach out to my social networks linked below, and let's get to the talk. All right, so what is a WebSocket? A WebSocket is a communications protocol distinct from HTTP that allows for bidirectional communication. So instead of following the HTTP logic of requests and responses and the client having to poke the server in order to get information, WebSockets work by opening up a connection, and that's called a handshake, keeping that connection open and persistent, allowing both sides to communicate bidirectionally, and then stopping once one side, either one, closes that connection. So here's a cool diagram I borrowed from OutSystems. You can find it at the bit.ly above. So it illustrates the differences between HTTP requests versus WebSockets. So as I've said, with HTTP, you have requests and responses. And with WebSockets, you get a handshake and acknowledgement and bidirectional messages until that connection ends. So what is Django Channels and what is it for? According to the docs themselves, Channels is a project that takes Django and extends its abilities beyond HTTP to handle WebSockets, chat protocols, IoT protocols, and more. But what does that mean? So it's a library that eases using WebSockets in Django by wrapping its native async views support in a way that is very similar to HTTP, while still maintaining support for it if you want to mix it up with your long-running connection views. It powers up Django in order to allow us to build cool things, such as the real-time chat example I'm going to show you in a few moments. And it's a great tool if you need to show data in real time in general. For instance, if you needed to show like which users were online at the moment and wanted it to be updated instantly, you could totally use channels for that purpose. You could also set up an amateur radio station using the library. In fact, that's my next pet project with Django channels. So yeah, the possibilities are endless, but for today, we're going with the default real-time chat example as it's quite simple to understand and has been covered by many online tutorials as the Getting Started project. Channels is built on top of ASGI. ASGI stands for Asynchronous Server Gateway Interface, while WSGI W stands for Web. Both are interfaces that allow us to connect our Python web framework to several web servers, such as Nginx or Apache, for instance. Django 3.0, released back in 2019, brought support for ASGI and intends on supporting both for the foreseeable future. But ASGI is considered to be kind of like a spiritual successor to WSGI, as it provides support both for asynchronous and synchronous apps, while WSGI only supports synchronous. Um, you can find out more about that in the following link. But the most relevant fact for today is that ASGI works with applications that are built with scopes and events. So applications divide connections into two items, scopes and events. The scope can be compared to a series of details about an incoming connection. For instance, in HTTP, a scope is tied to a request. So if that request ends, the scope also ends. For WebSockets, connections work a little differently. They last for the lifetime of the WebSocket. So if that connection closes, the scope follows. That's where events come in. Events happen in series inside scope. So for HTTP, the events would be requests and responses, while for a real-time chat, for instance, we could consider the messages exchanged in the chat room as events inside that scope. Django Channels docs themselves offer two pretty good examples of the differences of scope and events for HTTP and a Chatbot protocol. So yeah, let's dive into them. Okay, so The first one is an example with HTTP. It starts by the user making an HTTP request. We open up a new HTTP type scope with details of the request path, method headers, etc. We send a HTTP request event with the HTTP body content. The channels or ASGI application processes this and generates an HTTP response event to send back to the browser and close the connection. And finally, the HTTP request/response is completed and the scope is destroyed. As for a chatbot, for instance, the user sends a first message to the chatbot. This opens the scope containing the user's username, chosen name, and user ID. The application is given a chat received message event with the event text. It does not have to respond, but could send one, two more, or more other chat messages back as chats and message events if it wanted to. The user sends more messages to the chatbot and more chat received message events are generated. And after a timeout or when the application process is restarted, the scope is closed. So I hope that clears up how scopes and events work for HTTP and other protocols. First, I'd like to talk about consumers. They're kind of like the channel's equivalent of Django views and hold the same lifetime as a scope. The difference from views is that they're usually long running. So when a socket comes in, Django channels will look into the routes we have set up, and we'll talk about routing in a bit. And we'll try to find the matching consumer for that socket or request so we can spin up a copy of it. Consumers are not a mandatory part of the library, as you can write your own ASGI apps from scratch, but they can make your life easier as they provide a good abstraction for you to structure the code you want to be run whenever events happen. And they also allow you to focus on more straightforward things, like if you want async or sync code, without making you worry about things such as threading. Here's an example of a consumer. This one inherits from WebSocket consumer, and you can see it has a few methods which you can override their connect, receive, and disconnect. And you also have access to other methods such as accept to accept a certain connection, close to stop that connection, send to send data back to the WebSocket, and well, you can do all kinds of conditional flows with it. Um, Here's another example, which is a chat consumer. It also inherits from a WebSocket consumer. And you can see it has a few conditional flows here, which we can try by ourselves later. Routing is very similar to what Django URLs is, and is a way of combining multiple consumers into a bigger app. They're nestable and they're valid ASGI apps themselves. Uh, and it's recommended that you use protocol type router as the root router, as you can nest more specific ones inside this one instead. Here's an example of this. Here you can see the protocol type router as a root router in our ASGI file, and it's supporting both HTTP and WebSocket. As you can see, the URL patterns for our chat app is they're nested inside an out middleware stack, which is a way of supporting authentication if we want to add it later on, and URL router, which is necessary in order to interpret our paths. Yeah, so let's talk a little bit about cross-process communication. When we start talking about our real-time chat example, it's implicit that we need to figure out a way of having everyone in the chat room receive one another's messages. Each connection is handled by an instance of the applications we just learned about in the previous slides. So for each user in the chat room, we spin up a copy of that application. The question now is, how do we get them to communicate? This is what channel layers are for. Well, layers are an optional part of the library, which you can turn on or off through your settings file. It is needed if you want to use groups. Each one of our apps has a channel name and is able to join groups. Groups is how we're going to get all of these copies to communicate. For now, that's everything we need to know in order to build our app. Okay, so I've created an app called MyChat, a project called MyChat in Django, and now we're going to get channels installed. We're going to start by running, pip install channels. After that's done, we're gonna add channels to our installed apps. Then we're gonna go to our ASGI file, and like for Django 3, it'll come with your project. If you're using 2, it's not gonna come, so you need to add it. And well, there's specific things you need to do for that, but we won't go into detail as we're using 3 here. And we're gonna import from channels.routing, import protocol type router, which is the root router we're going to use. Cool. So now, instead of having this, we're going to wrap everything into a protocol type router, and it's going to receive a dictionary, which will be just HTTP for now. And we're going to get our get ASGI application. Finally, we're going to go into our settings again, and we're going to add ASGI application. And we're going to use my chat, which is the name of my Django project, ASGI.application, which is the name we set here. So it should be installed now. It should be done. Let's get to the next part. Now we're going to create our chat app. So we're going to run Python manage try start app chat. Cool. So it should be here. Now we're going to go into our settings again, we're going to add chat to our installed apps. And then we're going to create our index view. You can find one at the docs. It's pretty simple. I've modified mine a little bit. Let's see here. We're going to have a directory called templates. And I'm going to create another directory called chat. And finally, we're going to have a file called index.html. So I'm going to paste what I've created. I've added some styling here, inline, but well, I don't recommend you do this. Please use external CSS files. But basically, it's going to be like the welcoming page to our chat application, which will show what chat room would you like to enter, an input, so the user can enter the name of the chat room, and an enter button. And there's a little bit of JavaScript here, which will allow enter and return to send, to submit the name of the room name. And when the user clicks the button, it'll take the value from the input and it'll paste into the URL. So we're going to have chat / the room name and then the slash. Cool. So let's create now a view for that. We're going to have a def index, and we're going to receive a request here. And we're going to have return render request, and then we're going to add our chat / index.html. Cool. That's set up. And now we're going to have to create a URLs file here. So we're going to have a Python file called URLs, just like we usually do. And we're going to import path from Django.urls. We're going to import our views from import views. And we're going to have some URL patterns here, which will receive a list of paths. So we're going to have a path empty string views. Oops, I didn't import path. Okay. Views dot index name is going to be index, and that's it. Finally, we're going to go into our URLs, and we're going to include the URLs we've just created there. So we're going to have path and chat slash, it's going to be our namespace. Yeah, no, it's going to be our prefix. And we're going to have include chat URLs. We also have to import that. So we're going to have from DjangoConf.urls import include. So that should be cool for us to run it. So we could run with Python manage Python server, and I'm not. Oops, no, that didn't work. Oops, yeah, that's it. It's gonna work now. Cool. So we got it up and running. We're not gonna migrate anything as we're not using the database for this example, but well, I'm gonna show you guys in a bit how that looks. So now we're going to create another HTML file called room. And I also have some code handy here. It's the one from the tutorial, a little bit of modifications regarding styling, but well, basically the same. What this does is the chat socket will receive a new WebSocket object, which is kind of like an API JavaScript provides in order for us to interact with servers. So it'll take the window location host and paste ws/chat/room name after that as a suffix. And we also have like some functions that the object provides, such as onMessage. So it runs every time a message is received, and it'll add the message that was just sent to the chat log. So it'll appear listed in the chat room. We also have an onClose function in case the server ends the connection. So it provides an error in the console called chat socket closed unexpectedly. What else? Yeah, we have the same kind of like code we had before for like accepting enter and returns as a send, as a submit. And we also have code regarding how the message is sent to the server. So we have the send function here, the chat socket provides. So we JSON stringify our message here. So yeah, basically that's it in the HTML file. Now we're gonna write a view for that. So we're gonna go into our views again, and we're gonna write def room receives a request and the room name. Oops, room name. And we're gonna return render the request, the template we've just created, so room.html, and we're gonna pass a dictionary with room name as room name. Oops, room name. And we're gonna create a route for that now. So we're gonna go into our chat URL. So we're gonna create a path, and we're gonna receive a string here with room name and slash, and we're gonna call views.room, and we're gonna call that room. So if we run that, we're gonna have a template for it, but like it won't work yet because we haven't written our consumers. So for now, that's all for our HTTP views. We're just gonna have these two, and yeah, we already have everything we need front end wise, and let's get into consumers. Okay, so now we're gonna start writing our consumers. We're gonna write our first consumer here. So we're gonna need to create a Python file called consumers in our chat app. And we're gonna import JSON as we're gonna decode that message we're receiving from the front end. And we're gonna import our WebSocket consumer from channels, generic WebSocket consumer. So we're gonna write a check consumer which is gonna inherit from WebSocket consumer. So here it is. And for now, we're just gonna override the receive method. We could override the connect or disconnect, but we're not gonna need that for now. So we're gonna get the JSON text here, and we're gonna load string text data, which we're gonna receive as a parameter here, text data, and we're gonna get a message from that. So message is text, JSON text, message. Then we're gonna use the method send to dump that string. So text data is going to be JSON dump string, and message is going to be message. Cool. That's a synchronous WebSocket. We're gonna write that as a synchronous later, but for now we're gonna treat it as synchronous. And now we're gonna add the routing for it. So we're gonna add another Python file here called routing. And here we're gonna import repath because the URL router has some limitations. We can't use path. So we're gonna import from Django.urls, import repath. And we're gonna import our consumer, our first consumer. So here, and we're gonna set our WebSocket URL patterns. So we're gonna receive a list here, and we're gonna add a repath, and our string is going to be WS, because it's a convention that we use WS for WebSocket protocols, chat, and then the room name. So here's room name, W plus, oops, here. And then consumers, chat consumer, and then we're going to use the method ASGI. I think we have an extra one. All right. Then we're going to go to our ASGI file, and we're going to include this. So we're going to go here, and under HTTP, we're going to add WebSocket now. And we're going to use, actually, we're going to import our auth middleware stack, which will allow us to get information from the session, such as like who's a logged in user and stuff if we want to add authentication later. So from channels.auth, import auth middleware stack. So we're going to use auth middleware stack here. And we're going to use also a URL router. So we're going to use from channels, oops, we already have one here. So we're going to just import URL router here and use it down here as well. And put chat, routing, WebSocket URL patterns. We're going to, yeah, that actually got imported. Cool. So yeah, that's basically it. We're going to migrate to, so Python manage by migrate. So we can use session things, and we're now going to get into layers. So we can get users to actually receive the messages other people were sending to. In order to use groups, we're going to need to enable channel layers. The first thing we're going to have to do, first you need to install Docker. I already have it installed, so I'm just going to run Docker run and the port I need. And I'm going to use Redis. Mine is already running, so I'm going to get an error, but yours should start pulling the image. And then we're going to pip install channels. Redis in order to use it. And finally, we're gonna go into our settings under ASGI application or wherever you'd like. And we're gonna add a setting called channel layers, and it's gonna have the backend as Redis, and it's gonna run on this port. Now we can rewrite our consumers to use groups. Let's see that. Now it's time to rewrite our consumer as a group using consumer. For that, we're gonna import a function called async to sync from ASGI ref .sync, import async to sync. That's going to be needed because channel layers are always asynchronous, but we're still using asynchronous consumer. So we're going to need that function to wrap our group adds around and group leaves and stuff. We're now going to override the connect method. So we're going to assign a room name by using the scope and getting the URL route and quarks. Finally, room name. We're gonna build a group name based on that room's name. So we're gonna call it room group name, and it can be like chat. Let me use F string here. Chats underline self.room name. And then we're gonna join a group. So we're gonna use that function I told you about, async to sync, and we're gonna use self.channelLayer.groupAdd to add a group, and we're gonna call it with self room group name and self channel name. Finally, we're gonna accept. We could use conditional flows here, but we don't want to do anything specific, so we're just going to accept the connection. We're also going to override the disconnect function. So we're going to have def disconnect. And we're going to have also an async to sync function, which is going to receive self channel layer group discard in order for us to leave the group when we close it, and it's also going to receive self group name, room group name, and self channel name. The receive function is going to change a little bit, so we're going to have the message here, and we're going to use async to sync self channel layer group send in order for us to send the message to the room group. So group send, and we're gonna use self.room group name. And the second parameter is going to be the type. So we're gonna add a dictionary here, and the dictionary is gonna have a type, which will be a chat message, and the message is going to be message. Cool. So we're gonna get rid of this because we don't need it anymore, and then we're gonna have another function called chat message in order to receive messages from the room group. So we're gonna have self and the event. As I told you, this is an event inside the scope. So we're gonna have message equals not receives event message, and we're gonna send that to the WebSocket. So text data is gonna be JSON.dumps dump string, and then message. Awesome. So we should have it now up and running. It's synchronous, but it works. Let's see how that works. So here I have two browsers open side by side so we can illustrate how that messaging will work. I'm gonna enter room one here, then room one here as well. And I'm gonna send a message. It appears on both, and I can send another message here, and it appears on both. So you can refine that and add usernames and logins and stuff, but that's the basic functionality here. Now let's rewrite that as asynchronous. Now we're going to make this asynchronous. First, we're going to inherit from async WebSocket consumer. Then we're going to use async def instead of def. So async in front of each one of these. Then we're gonna get rid of async to sync as it was just kind of like an adapter for us. So we're gonna group add directly and use await for that. We're also gonna use await for self-accept. And we're gonna do that basically for everything. We're gonna use await, get rid of this. Um, await, await here as well. Get rid of this. And finally here. Wait, that's it. So yeah, we've made that asynchronous and it should work just like the example we did before. So that's it. Thank you very much. I hope you enjoyed this beginnerish talk about Django channels. Please feel free to reach out in my social networks linked below. And well, see you in the Q&A.
Hi, Amanda. So
Hi.
Hello.
I have a question regarding WebSockets. I'm new to this one, but I hope this question makes sense. So you you mentioned about that synchronous and asynchronous communication, but that WebSocket remain open throughout the time. For example, if even there is no any initiation between the maybe the chat application, let's say if there is no any starting point, then the WebSocket remains open throughout the let's say throughout the life of the applications, or
Hmm.
how that works. Can you please explain it?
Yeah. I'm not really an expert at WebSockets, but like it remains open for all the lifetime until somebody closes that connection, either the client or the server. So yeah, I couldn't get into much detail of how WebSockets work because I also am not an expert at that. But yeah, it works like that. It remains open.
Okay,
Sorry.
that makes sense. So that means like either of the in, let's say the client or server supposed to close it. So, but I think the client closing the in case of chat application, that means he just close the chat browser. That means it will close, right? So that is
Yeah.
the
Yeah. Exactly.
okay. Yeah. Thank you.
No problem.
Hi, Amanda.
Hi.
Django Channel is a fork of Django, right?
It's a library, I think. I don't think it's a fork.
Okay. So when do you think they can converge in the same project? Do you think is it possible? And who is portare avanti? 1 second.
No problem.
Who can carry on this project, this library? Is I want to know if is a library with a future, because is a lot of time that Django Channels exists, but I
Yes.
don't know what is the future of Django Channels.
Yeah, I'm not sure if I can say that as well, because well, I think it's been here since 2016, if I'm not mistaken.
Yes.
Uh, and like Django is a known framework for like having batteries packed with it. So like we don't have a guarantee that Django channels or something similar won't be released in the future with the Django update. I think only folks at the Django project can say that. But up until now, I haven't heard of anything that like would work as channels does. Like Django actually introduced support, native support for ASGI in Django 3.0. So maybe that's something that is coming soon. But like channels is just a way of abstracting some things about WebSockets and like other protocols. It's kind of like a framework within a framework, I would say. So like it's just a way of making it easier. I'm not sure if Django would want to do that, but yeah. Oh,
Okay.
Channels, thank you. Channels is an official Django project. You're right.
Okay.
Thank you, Glass.
Thank you.
Hi.
Hey.
I have a question. In your example, you were using Redis, so as I understand, the chat is not persistent.
Yes.
Like in the database, but can it be made persistent to the database?
It can. It can. Yeah, you can access the database and use it, but I mean, that was kind of like a beginner example. And like when you're using the database with asynchronous things, you need to worry about concurrency and things such as these. I personally haven't had experience, like direct experience with it, but it can definitely be done.
Okay, thanks.
Thank you.
Hello, can we do direct messaging with Django channels? Direct
Yes.
messaging, person to person.
Yes, you can.
Can you please tell the procedure of how we can do that?
Well, I think there must be some tutorials out there about it. I haven't actually done that.
Okay, no problem. Thank you.
Thank you. I can try to find one and I'll send you later if I do, but it can be used for any kind of instant things. Let me see if I can find one.
Can Django channels can be used in industry-based products? Industry-based products like I want to build a chat application and I will deploy it in the production, and it will be an industry-based solution. Can we use Django channels for this?
I personally haven't had any experience with distributed systems in general, so I really don't know. Sorry, but maybe you can. Maybe if someone here knows more about that.
Okay, cool.
Amanda, do you have this project in a GitHub repository that we
I'll
can
be
check?
I'll be uploading that later and I'll send it in the Slack channel. I already have one, but it's like the first one I did, so I didn't want to like share the old one because maybe I've done some modifications. So I'll push the new one and send it in the general chat later.
Thanks.
I have a question to the client side. As far as I know, if the connection gets lost or so, you need some special handling in the Java client side, and I heard there are several wrappers to WebSocket, so it's easier to do the JavaScript thing. Which do you recommend here?
Yeah, you can like raise exceptions as well in the backend. I haven't shown that in my talk, but let me try to find it. I think there's a section on error handling.
Okay. So I was looking, I heard that there are libraries, and I just don't know, remember the name. So it's easier for the WebSocket handling.
Oh.
On the client side, so in JavaScript.
Oh, got it. Okay. Yeah, we like in the example, we actually used error handling in JavaScript. Like the error comes from the backend, but like we print a console log there.
Mhm.
Of course, there must be like a better way of doing this, but yeah.
Cool. Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Folks, I'll be going in case you guys don't have any more questions.
Thank you.
Thank you very much
Nice
for
day.
attending. Have a nice day.
Thank you. Bye bye.
Bye bye.